Thank you very much for coming to this special press briefing. As you are aware, we are in the middle of the visit of the Prime Minister of Nepal to India. And to brief you on the visit, we have with us the Foreign Secretary of India. We also have our Ambassador in Nepal and Joint Secretary North, Sri Sudhakar Dalela. The format is, I think, very clear to you all. FS will brief you first, and after that we will take few questions depending on the time we have. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. As JSXP said, we are still in the midst of the visit by the Prime Minister of Nepal, and this is a state visit. And the Prime Minister was accompanied by his wife, by the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, by his Minister of Finance, by his Minister of Culture, Tourism and Civil Aviation, as well as by his Minister of Commerce and a number of officials. Now, the Prime Minister's program, yesterday actually the program began with a meeting with our Prime Minister. It was a one-on-one meeting, and today in the morning there was the official forecourt welcoming ceremony. Then the Prime Minister Dioba went to Rajghat to pay tribute to Mahatma Gandhi's memory. Then he held talks with the Prime Minister. Our Prime Minister hosted a lunch. Many of you would have seen the press statement after the talks. And then he called on the Vice President and the President. We've just finished the call on the President. Two ministers from our side called on the Prime Minister, External Affairs Minister, and then Finance Minister. This is Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Dioba's first state visit since assumption of office as Prime Minister this time. He is Prime Minister for the fourth time in Nepal, and he has been 4 times to India as Prime Minister earlier. In terms of the rest of his program, I believe he has an event today, but yesterday he had a business meeting with the business community, and then from Delhi he goes on to Hyderabad, to Tirupati, to Bodh Gaya, and then he returns to Nepal. Now, in terms of the substance of the discussions and the outcomes, I'll just very quickly run you through that. Today, at all the meetings actually, our leaders expressed their sympathy and distress at the floods that had hit Nepal, and as you all know, there have been floods in Nepal and floods on our side in Bihar and UP as well. So there was both an expression of sympathy, condolence, and also of support. You would also be aware that we have announced immediate relief assistance of 25 crores. I'm happy to share with you that our first lot of supplies have actually reached Biratnagar today. In terms of what I'd like to do is really perhaps thematically, I would like to, rather than describe which issues came up exactly where, I'd like to cover the issues in common. I'd be happy to address questions in detail. Broadly, the discussions covered a little bit of what was happening in Nepal, then obviously a lot of what was the India-Nepal cooperation, especially in development assistance and connectivity, as well as the discussions we had on the way already on the earthquake reconstruction issue. Now, in terms of the discussions on developments in Nepal, I think the two Prime Ministers were of the view that democratic institutions were indispensable for peace, development and prosperity. The Prime Minister of Nepal briefed our Prime Minister on recent developments in his country. And our Prime Minister welcomed the successful conduct of 2 phases of local level elections and congratulated the Prime Minister of Nepal in this regard. He also appreciated the efforts being made by the government of Nepal to take all sections of society on board in the constitution implementation process and in establishing Nepal as a federal democratic republic. The Prime Minister of Nepal thanked our Prime Minister and the government for the assistance that we have provided for the conduct of the local level elections. Now, in terms of our bilateral ties, we covered a number of areas, defense, security, the development partnership that we have, connectivity issues, capacity building issues, people-to-people contacts. On the defense, on the security side, I think there was a recognition that being an open border, both of us had to take extra care to ensure that this border is not misused and does not pose a security threat to either side. This issue did come up in many of the meetings. And we reaffirmed our continuing commitment for training and capacity building of security forces of Nepal. On the development assistance side, I think we really much of the discussion was on the earthquake reconstruction. Now, on the earthquake reconstruction, we have now reached a stage, as again, if I can walk back a bit, we had committed $1 billion for reconstruction efforts in Nepal. We were the largest donor commitment. Now, what we have done since then is we have worked on the ground and essentially come up with projects in different sectors. Now, there are 4 broad sectors for this earthquake reconstruction. One, of course, is housing, where we have made a commitment to help with 50,000 houses. This is an owner-driven reconstruction program. Then we have the health sector, where we have identified 157 projects. The education, mainly schools, where we have identified 70 of them for reconstruction. And the culture heritage site, as you know, many of the monuments and major cultural centers of Nepal were damaged or destroyed during the earthquake. So we've identified 28 of those. So what we did today was we signed really 4 agreements which dealt with the modalities of assistance. So this is an enabling document, and this will now help us to move forward in all these sectors. Staying on the development side, as in terms of the sort of the macro picture, one of the developments today was that from our side, Niti Aayog, and from the Nepali side, the National Planning Commission agreed on a policy dialogue where we would learn from each other's experiences. That we felt was a very useful step. So with that, let me come to the connectivity and the infrastructure cooperation that we have with Nepal. I think both of us attach a lot of value to it. And again, many of you are familiar, not just with Nepal, but larger neighborhood. The fact that we have a neighborhood first policy, you heard the Prime Minister say on many occasions that Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas is not just a domestic policy, it is also a neighborhood. It has a foreign policy aspect to it as well. So sort of the underlying thinking is really that if India grows, our prosperity, our development must also percolate to our neighborhood, and they too must have stakes in what is happening in India. So with that in view, actually we reviewed ongoing connectivity and infrastructure projects, and we also charted out the agenda ahead of us. In terms of the highlights of that review, I think sort of a big part of that pertained to the railway sector, where there's been progress on two rail link projects from Jayanagar, Bijalpur, Bardibas, and the Jogbani, Biratnagar rail link. But the 2 Prime Ministers also felt that we should move more expeditiously to complete the field location survey of the 3 other rail links to which we have committed: the new Jalpaiguri Kakarbeta, the Northanwa Bhairava, and the Nepalganj road to Nepalganj. Then on the land, we are today building ICPs, and we are hopeful that ICP Birganj, which is the most advanced, would be operationalized by December this year. Again, the two Prime Ministers put emphasis that the 2 other ICPs at Bhairava and Nepalganj should be expedited with early approvals of their engineering designs. Moving on from ICPs to the roads, we have had this Terai Road project underway for some time. That has made progress in the last year, certainly since the last visit of the last Nepali Prime Minister. We have now awarded contracts for 12 packages dealing with 9 roads covering roughly about 240 kilometers. And I think the expectation is that the Nepal side would work to remove the encumbrances and other impediments which will allow the project to move forward quickly. 2 other projects on which with the Prime Ministers noted that the preparations had been made and that they needed to be expedited. One was the Dharamshala at the Pashupatinath temple. The other is the Nepal Bharat Maitri Polytechnic at Hetauda. Now, on the energy side, we have been working, this is a very important project. This is a petroleum pipeline project from Motihari to Amlekganj. And what we were able to present before the Prime Ministers today was the fact that the detailed engineering route survey and the engineering design reports of the project had been finalized. So the Prime Ministers really pushed us to move much faster on this. And we've also agreed that we would consider looking at the construction of an LPG pipeline from Motihari to Amlekganj, a natural gas pipeline from Gorakhpur to Sunwal, and extending the Amlekganj pipeline to Chitwan, which is further west in Nepal. Now, in terms of the future agenda, I'm still staying with the infrastructure connectivity side. The Nepal side, actually, when External Affairs Minister had gone recently to Kathmandu for the BIMSTEC meeting, we had discussed at that time that we would like to know Nepal's priorities so that our assistance cooperation offers really target what are their priorities. So in the last few days and weeks, the Nepali side was actually able to share with us what are their national priorities. And out of those, we examined what we think are doable and what mode. In some cases, I think it was much easier for us to make a commitment. In some cases, clearly we need to have further discussions. I think the 2 important commitments that we made today, both under grant assistance, where one was for a technical institute at Dhangadi, and the other is for the GP Koirala National Center for Respiratory Diseases at Tanahun. In addition to that, we agreed that we would examine the feasibility of cooperation in 10 other areas. And this included 2 railway projects, which are essentially extensions of railway projects which are planned now, which is Kushinagar, Lumbini, Kapilavastu, as well as Bardiba, Birganj. Then upgradation of 2 roads. These are roads which are 2-lane roads. The proposal is to look at making them into 4-lane roads. And then the possibility of construction of an international airport at Nijgarh. Then the idea of constructing more motorable bridges across the Mahakali River. Then the expansion and renovation of the Maitri Bridge at Birganj Raxol. The development of a dry port at Dhodra Chandni. The possibility of special economic zones on the India-Nepal border. as well as the development of transmission cross-border, a number of cross-border transmission lines. What we would be doing is we'd be giving out the details of the joint statement which will be released later in the evening. So as you can see, these are a pretty broad array of infrastructure and connectivity issues, I mean ranging from rail, road, airport, bridges, dry port, industrial manufacturing zones, as well as transmission lines. So our expectation is that we would be able to have feasibility discussions with the Nepal side in the coming months, and we would certainly like to be in a position to make clearer commitments in the near future. Water and energy were the two other subjects of considerable discussion. I think one of the more noteworthy sort of areas of progress during this visit was with respect to the Pancheshwar multipurpose project. I think you heard both our Prime Minister and Prime Minister Deoba refer to it in their remarks. And we had really very positive and productive discussions. And the short point there is we have a DPR, a detailed project report, which has been under discussion now for some time, and we have been directed to close it out in the next month. And I can't overstate the importance of this project. I mean, this is really roughly a 5,000 megawatt project. It would be in this part of the world really a mammoth project, which has been under discussion. The agreement for this was signed 20 years ago, coincidentally by Prime Minister Deoba in one of his early incarnations in that position. And moving this would be a very, very big step in our bilateral energy and water cooperation. The Prime Minister Deoba also shared with us that on the Nepal side, two projects which have been sort of, I would say, slowed down because they faced various impediments in Nepal. Some of it pertained to forest laws and their regulations. Those, his government had taken steps to address it, and for us, the two of them, one is Arun 3, one is Upper Karnali. I think Arun 3 in particular is a project on which we hope to see forward movement, because the cabinet has cleared, this is a public sector project. SJVN is the executing entity on our side, and cabinet has cleared the investment into that project. On our side, we had also conveyed to the Nepali side that we had finalized the DPR for the construction of the head regulator and link canal from the Tanakpur barrage to the Nepali side. This is an old commitment, and we are now in a position to go forward with that. Now, as I began with the floods, let me also tell you that given the flood situation, this did occupy a large part of the discussion, especially today between the Prime Ministers. And what we would really like to do is to strengthen consultation, coordination between the two sides on the issues of inundation and flood management in the border areas. The two governments also agreed that they would take expeditious steps, including joint visits, to consider measures for sustainable solutions to the flood problem. Now, there's another project which has been under discussion for some time, which is the Saptkoshi High Dam and the Sunkoshi Storage and Diversion Scheme. So the Prime Ministers, and this relates to the flood issue, I think most of you are aware of that. So the two Prime Ministers agreed that work should commence on the preparation of the DPR for these projects. Now, in addition to this, power was the other big issue, and you would have seen that the two Prime Ministers sort of did by virtual inauguration of two transmission lines today between Kataya and Kusaha, and Raxaul and Parvanipur. And we had earlier done Muzaffarpur, Dhalke Bar, and today really supply of power from India to Nepal has become a very major area of our energy cooperation. And again, given the demand situation in Nepal, Prime Minister was very positive on this and assured Prime Minister Deoba that we'd be responsive to any future requests that the Nepal side might have of us. There were other sort of discussions broadly on people-to-people contacts, a little bit on trade and economic issues. And we signed 8 agreements today. We signed and exchanged those agreements. 4 of them, as I said, pertained to the earthquake reconstruction, the 4 sectors. There was one between the Bureau of Standards, one on the narcotics side, one very important one which pertained to the construction of the Mechi Bridge, and finally one on the chartered accountant side. So this, I think, broadly was the is a sort of summary of the discussions which took place today, and the on the at the conclusion of the talks, the one Prime Minister Deoba invited our Prime Minister to visit Nepal. He said at least he would hope that he could come possibly, I think, for the foundation foundation laying of the Arun 3 project, and we are of course also in discussion with Nepal on BIMSTEC. Many of you are aware that Nepal is the chair of BIMSTEC. We had a very successful foreign ministers meeting, so we are discussing the possibility whether there would be a higher level meeting in that regard. So I think from my side that is broadly. Manjeev, is there something further you would like to add? Anything on your side? So I'd be happy to take questions.
Yes, please.
So there have been reports that China has been keeping Nepal in the loop about the situation at Doklam. Did this figure in, did India also convey its position to the Nepalese PM on what is exactly is happening there? And also I would presume that because there are a lot of Nepalese Gorkhas who are in the Indian army, I would presume that any possibility of a conflict would be of concern to Kathmandu. Thanks.
You are free to presume, that's your privilege, but the subject did not come up.
Foreign Secretary Smita Sharma here. You mentioned about BIMSTEC, but it's almost a year now post whatever happened after the Uri attacks. With the Secretariat in Kathmandu, is there any roadmap for SAARC ahead that's been discussed, or any message from the member states of SAARC that's been conveyed to them?
Today, there were no discussions pertaining specifically to the SAARC.
Maybe, I think, 2 more questions. Up.
So normally when the summit level meeting takes place with the important country like Nepal, generally we talk about all mutual issues, regional issues, and also of global issues. So India-China issues are very important regional issue at this point of time, not only in a view of Doklam confrontation, but also there is some sort of engagement of Nepal with both the countries. Vice Premier of China was recently in Nepal also. So how did it figure, how India-China relationship figured in the discussions?
We will take one more question.
Sir, I think the short answer is it did not.
Yes, you, and we will take 2 questions at one time. Or up.
So, less than 2 days ago, you and the Defense Secretary and officials from both sides had a long meeting on defense diplomacy where Nepal came up and Bhutan came up, such issues. So, those issues, did some of them come up in the meeting with the Prime Minister today?
after him.
सर मेरा सवाल बाढ़ को लेकर है। बेसिकली पीएम ने भी फ्लड को लेकर चर्चा की और जाहिर तौर पर बिहार और यूपी दोनों प्रभावित है। लगातार पिछली सरकारों ने भी और मौजूदा सरकार भी ये कह रही है कि लॉन्ग टर्म सॉल्यूशन को लेकर विचार किया जा रहा है, लेकिन क्या है दरअसल वो रोड मैप जिस पर विचार होगा, किस तरह के डैम बनेंगे और किस तरह के पावर प्रोजेक्ट्स होंगे जिससे जो फ्लड सिचुएशंस हैं खासतौर पर नेपाल से आने वाली नदियों का बिहार उत्तर प्रदेश में वो खत्म हो सके, उस पर रोक लग सके।
I think in response to your question, the best answer that first of all, I'm not entirely sure what you are asking, but if you are looking at the defense side, as I said, there were two aspects to it. One, the open border, on which both of us agreed that we needed to be very vigilant and ensure that it was not misused. And two was relating capacity building and exchanges that we do with different elements of the Nepali security side, and the broad direction of the discussions was how we could expand those cooperation. So I hope that broadly answers the question that you are asking. आपका जो सवाल जो है, देखिए, the main issue, I mean today the issue of flood management, irrigation, flood management, these are priority issues. हमारे यहाँ भी बाढ़ है, उनके यहाँ भी बाढ़ है, और आज का जो मैसेज ये था कि we have to work together on this, and we actually have something called a joint committee on inundation and flood management, and we have joint teams of experts. वो लोग, they keep looking at these issues, but clearly the sense of today's discussion was that we have to do more, we have to do it more purposefully, more seriously, and that is why the idea that we should do joint visits and we should look at the important thing was to look for a sustainable solution. It should not be something which is a fix for this year.
Third row.
The Nepalese parliament failed to pass this constitutional amendment bill to address the issues concerning the Madhesis. Now, did this issue come up in the bilateral talks today? Did India seek any kind of assurance from the Nepalese PM on addressing the Madhesis issues, and did he give any kind of assurance on this matter?
So this Lumbini and Janakpur both are situated in Nepal. Was there a talk about Ramayan circuit and Buddhist circuit?
The first question on what had happened recently with regard to developments in terms of the Constitution Amendment Bill. Yes, let me sort of step back a bit, and our position, as you know, has been that it's important that, and this is something the Prime Minister and other Indian leaders and spokesmen have been saying, which is to have the broadest possible consensus and carry all sections of society on the constitution making and implementation process. Now, the Prime Minister of Nepal did, and for us the issue is that the success of Nepal leads to the stability and progress and growth of Nepal. So it is really the concern and good wishes of a very well-meaning neighbor. So I think that was really the sort of approach with which we have sort of had conversations on this. The Prime Minister of Nepal did share with us that his government and the political coalition of which he is the leader has been making efforts in that direction. This is work in progress. Sometimes they make more progress, sometimes they make less progress, but certainly there was a sort of a commitment and a direction they were going, and that direction was in terms of broadening the consensus and making the constitution implementation process as successful and effective as they could. In terms of जो आपका सवाल जो था, actually in fact the Ramayan circuit, that issue came up in more than one meeting. I think it came up in the meeting with the Prime Minister. I think President, Vice President also mentioned it. And in fact, one of the projects, priority projects that Nepal has drawn to our attention is to extend the railway link from Kushinagar to Lumbini and Kapilavastu. And what we would like to do is, the enhancement of rail connectivity, of road connectivity does increase the facilitate the movement of people. It creates a basis for expanded tourism for Nepal, and certainly we will be very supportive of them in that. I mean, partly there is a lot of interest on part of the people of India too, but it is something which is very important for Nepal's own growth possibility. So this is an area where we will be very, very supportive of Nepal.
Maybe we will take the last round of questions. Yes, please.
फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी दिस साइड सर. सर आपने कहा कि आज जो बायलैटरल मीटिंग हुई है उसमें डोकलाम पे कोई डिस्कशन नहीं हुआ, बट सर बोथ द लीडर्स मेट येस्टरडे आल्सो. क्या कल इसको लेकर के कोई बात हुई थी? नेपाल ने नो बिकॉज येस्टरडे वाज आल्सो एक्सटेंसिव टॉक्स बिटवीन द टू लीडर्स, सो क्या इस बारे में कोई बात हुई? और आज सिग्निफिकेंटली नेपाल के प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने कहा वी वोंट अलाउ एनी एंटी इंडिया एक्टिविटी. व्हाट डू वी मेक ऑफ इट?
So the Prime Minister of Nepal very clearly stated today that there are certain issues in the constitution of Nepal. Then he went on to say that hopefully in future perhaps there will be a constitution which will represent all sides. Now the issue is what is the government of India's position on the Madhesis today? Has there been a change in the attitude towards the Madhesis? Are you okay if Nepal doesn't address the issue in the immediate future? Because he's talking about hopefully sometime in near future.
आपका जो सवाल जो था, नहीं ऐसा कुछ नहीं था कि आज नहीं बात हुई कल हुई, आज भी नहीं हुई कल भी नहीं हुई. और जो आपका दूसरा प्रश्न था उसके साथ हाँ जो about not no, I think that again pertain largely to the open border, the security concerns which come from an open border. तो उनके साइड से वो reassurance था, आश्वासन था, तो आपको उस स्पिरिट में लेना चाहिए. On the constitution issue, see, our position has been very clear and has been very consistent, which is that effort should be made to take all sections of society on board in constitution implementation process and in establishing Nepal as a federal democratic republic. This is our position. It cannot be clearer than that. Now, in terms of what where Nepal is going, at what speed they are going, how they hope to go forward, that is clearly a judgment which the leadership of Nepal has to make. But from our side, as I said, as a neighbor, we wish them well. We would like to see stability. We would like to see harmony. We would like to see prosperity, economic activity, and we feel that if there is a broad consensus on this issue, it will be helpful in that direction. So beyond that, I don't think it would be right for us to comment on this matter.
Maybe last question. Geeta. This is last.
Yes. Any discussions on the Kalapani issue? This is another tri-junction. So was there any discussion regarding the border problems or disputes that India and Nepal have?
No.
Thank you all for coming to this special briefing. Thank you.